everybody. Welcome to this session. And I think because of the design of the room, we'll try and keep this as informal as possible. Very much encourage questions and debate. And hopefully you'll all feel moved to contribute, as our panelists will. The subject of the session is climate change and global commons. And I was trying to think what that phrase actually meant. And I recalled an incident during a filming trip that I made to the Amazon rainforest, where we were out with the environmental police, IBAMA, 7 guys covering an area of forest twice the size of Britain. And they took us off to a freshly deforested area. And to everyone's great surprise, in the distance we saw a truck, obviously bad guys, and drove over to this truck. And there was no one around, but there were 4 freshly felled logs on the back of the truck with the sap still dripping. I remember very vividly the sap dripping. And this policeman with a gun went off to try and find the loggers, and he came back a little bit later with them. And I interviewed the chief logger. I said, well, why, what are you doing? He said, okay, I admit, hands in the air, I was illegally chopping these trees down. So I said, why? I said, well, I need the money. These trees are just here. It's my country. I need the money. So then I said, well, why do you need the money? He said, well, I've got to pay off a fine. I said, what's the fine for? Well, I was caught illegally logging previous month. And it occurred to me that that little episode kind of sums up one of the issues here, where local people very often feel that the nature around them is for theirs to use. And in a sense, who are we as outsiders to say that they shouldn't? And there's no way that he could understand the climate impact of chopping 4 trees down, tip of the iceberg, obviously, of a swathe of deforestation across the Amazon. So that just what I had in mind, a very sort of real example of kind of what we're talking about. But it extends to fisheries. It extends to all kinds of different aspects of the natural world, as we'll hear. Well, we've got a very distinguished and varied panel, if I may say. Immediately on my right here, Julia Marton-Lefèvre, who's Director General of the IUCN. The end there, Pavan Sukhdev, who's Director of the Global Markets Division of Deutsche Bank, and running the TEEB study into the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity. To my left, Mattis Wackernagel as Executive Director of the Global Footprint Network, and to my left, Stephen Wells, who's President of the Desert Research Institute of the Nevada System of Higher Education. Each panelist will make an opening statement, and then we'll get the debate going. For particular reasons, Stephen has to leave us at 9:45, so I'm going to invite him to speak first. I'm going to hand you, we've got 1 mic between the 5 of us, which means that if I have to shut you up, I shall reach across and grab the mic off you. But Stephen.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. My apologies for leaving early. There's been a death in my family, so I have to catch a flight. So it's not because I lack interest or want to participate with questions. I thought I would approach the issues, the questions that have been laid out in there on resource protection by essentially 2 different scales. Because I'm an earth scientist, I'm a geologist, and I think about scales both in time and space. And it seems to me that the most immediate action that we need, the most profound action, and this has been a theme that we heard yesterday, is a profound change in the way that we think. And if I could quote from one of our more intelligent people of our society last century, Albert Einstein, who said, without changing our patterns of thought, we will not be able to solve the problems we've created with our current pattern of thought. And I think this is actually a very fundamental part of resource protection and restoring the resiliency of our planet. There has always been a lack of reverence for time and space and understanding of the planet as a system. We tend to view things as pieces and not as a whole. I think the example that you gave, David, is exactly clear, that they don't understand that each one of those trees have a very special role that they're playing in the composite of the forest, which then plays a role in the composite of the watershed of the Amazon. And so there is some efforts being undertaken in the U.S. government, actually in the Department of Interior, with Michael Gallus leading some of this, that we have, there are 2 systems that have co-evolved over time. The Earth's natural system, that's evolved for about 4.5 billion years, providing us with our life-sustaining resources. And then over the past 15,000 years, there's been the human network that's been built in more and more elaborate ways. And there was a point at which we crossed over, and the human network now is de-evolving from the natural network. And this is a serious issue, and that de-evolution essentially comes from the fact that we think of the immediacy and not of the long term. We don't think of the system, we think of the pieces. And so I think there has to be a profound change there. And one of the suggestions that I have is actually, because I think there are ways of solving the problem from the experience that I've had, would be money and media. There was a time in the United States where you drove along and you threw your trash out the window of a car. That was the easy way of getting rid of it. And there was a campaign showing a Native American crying by the edge of the road with the trash at his feet. Well, now we have the internet and home pages, and it seems to me that every home page could have something very appropriate, tick, 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 or illustrations of the natural system with the human network overprinted on that, so we never forget the complications that we have. So understanding that there are two systems that are now de-evolving and the challenges, the perception of change, this is probably one of the biggest challenges that as administrators, people don't like and appreciate change, but it happens all the time. And so if we're going to adapt, and if you look historically at cultures, their inability to adapt and the size of the type of environmental change can come into collision, and the catastrophe of the societal collapse can be immense. That's some of the work that Jared Diamond has put out there. So it seems to me that globally we have to change our human network. We have to change that from one that's very low efficiency and high impact network to one that's just the opposite, very high efficiency and low impact. And this is not an easy step to do that. So we also have to, I believe, create a global reverence for natural systems, enhanced resilience through the stability and restoration that we have. So if I can just take one more minute to perhaps give a personal example. In Nevada, we have one of the biggest challenges is the common resource of water. And there are rivers that drain high mountains that end up in terminal basins within the deserts of Nevada. And typically at those terminal basins are where the Native Americans, the indigenous tribes live. They've been given those resources. But all the way up along the river, there are ranchers, farmers who appropriate that water and take it. And never in our history have we given the reservoir, the lake, that is the terminus of these waters, any type of rights. So starting in the 1800s, we've given the farmers rights. And as a consequence, the terminal lakes have dropped something like 50 meters, threatening the life-sustaining fisheries of those areas and impacting the native species. The salinity has increased from about 2,500 milligrams per liter to now 16,000. So it's approaching seawater, and it's killing the fish. And so the challenge actually was presented to our state by Senator Harry Reid, our majority leader, saying, how can we save this? What can we do? He's very, very interested in the environmental issues and in protection of resources. And so he called upon the universities and the communities to work together. And we have, I'd say the most important thing that we've done is the ability of purchasing water rights from the landowners. It's required money to have people divert their water, give up their water rights, and put those back into the river to bring the lake back into a sustainable condition. This is an experiment that's ongoing. Some ranchers are willing to do that. But at the same time, if you destroy the economy of the valley and you turn that into a wasteland, you've not really accomplished much. And we've done that experiment once with the Owens River Valley. And so now we're looking at alternative crops and ways of sustaining those activities. And so it's required the money, it's required trust, and that's all been a function of personal interactions and media.